This is Going Viral, and here's Jim Dingeman.
Welcome to Going Viral, the Tuesday, February 8th edition. This is Jim Dingeman. I'm in New York City. I'm joined with Victor Wallis from Boston, Ken Aaron from California, Dennis Goldstein, and Alex Stavropoulos from the New York City area. Just to go through some of the headlines today, it looks like there has been some progress. Macron claims that Putin has given him personal assurances that he will not escalate the crisis. Let's see if that is accurate, or is this just simply Russian maskirovka? Macron's remarks on Russia have set alarm bells ringing, the news says. And so, again, we're going to see what happens in this crisis. In the situation in Canada, it's very interesting. The truckers have blocked the main bridge to the United States as Trudeau demands an end to a protest. As Alex knows, this weekend we were talking to Canadian, and they described them as, what was the phrase, Alex? The Truck Klux Klan?
Yes.
Yeah, right. So, and that, of course, he's pointing out who's funding it. It's sort of interesting. It sort of has the same parameters as what we are learning about the January 6th events. However, of course, you know, there's other aspects of this that we could talk about as we go on, because it's not just, I think it's oversimplifying these kind of right-wing mass protests to simply reduce them to right-wing conspiracy, which I think misses some of the points of genuine class distinctions and anger in these events. The Winter Olympics is going on in Beijing. You know, people have been watching it. Eileen Gu soars to the gold as China embraces a dual cultural star. This is a woman, by the way, who I believe was originally an American citizen, and then she decided to change her nationality to become a full-blown member of the People's Republic of China. You have, of course, the further rolling out of the fighting against the Omicron virus. Drug makers are accused of pandemic profiting. This is Pfizer, and this is an issue that I think has been raised and talked about by us on this show. I know it's part of left-wing critique and the anti-vaxxer movement, etc. I hope in not saying that word anti-vaxxer, we don't get banned again by YouTube, but the hell with it. And there's an issue of, if putting Big Pharma in charge of the global vaccine rollout is the policy, well, what does that mean? You know, what's the advantages and disadvantages of that? Because, you know, that I think is a serious critique of what's going on. McConnell has criticized the Republican National Committee critique and censure of both Liz Cheney and Representative Kinzer, and he calls the January 6th events a violent insurrection. And, you know, that's a big break from Donald Trump. Donald Trump, as we know, it's important to keep track of what Trump's up to. He basically is calling for all the people to be excused. He's calling for violent demonstrations to occur in the cities where his family will be subjected to the rule of law, and who knows what will happen in this situation. And again, we're going to focus initially on the question of the Ukraine. I'm going to share in a moment or two something. But before I do that, Alex, do you have any headlines that you want to share, any pieces you want to share with us right now?
Reminding me, sharing, and yeah, here we go.
Former President of Honduras, Manuel Zelaya, met with Jorge Calix to address the political crisis in the Central American country. During their meeting, a deal to preserve peace and fairness in the Congress was struck. The signing of an agreement concerning the new formation of several bodies of the government was seen as one of the aims to preserve unity above differences by the ex-dignitary Manuel Zelaya, now a general coordinator of the Libre Party. Calix committed to resigning his post as head of Congress, so in his stead, Luis Redondo can assume office, as agreed upon by President Xiomara Castro's and Salvador Nasrallah's allied parties during their campaign. This represents itself with the condition that the Libre Party now reinstates those members of parliament formerly among the organization's ranks who oppose Redondo's presidency of Congress by appointing Calix. President of Peru, Pedro Castillo, reaffirmed his position on governing until the end of his term and carrying out his campaign promises amidst the harshening of the slander campaign conducted against him and his party by the far-right opposition and the media. In a brief release addressed to the public opinion, as reflected on his Twitter account, the presidency denounced the media campaign that the far-right has launched to promote his ousting from office, which he labeled as anti-democratic and perilous for the country's stability. The official denied the claims, saying his staff overstepped boundaries concerning the decision-making process, while condemning the attempted soft coups carried out against his rule that respond to a set of wealthy minority interests. The president also ratified his commitment to the people of Peru.
All right, so just to add one little thing to the Honduras story. Manuel Zelaya is, of course, one thing is he's the husband of the new president, Xiomara Castro, and he's also the reason she ran is because he was the former president, and she was kind of running for almost like a second term of his. And so the fact that he was, of course, overthrown by a U.S.-backed Honduran military who literally put him on a plane and flew him out of the country and said, your presidency is over. So the fact that he's involved in this is, he's a stand-up guy not a big fan of the U.S. So the fact that he's deeply involved in these politics is rather interesting and doesn't bode well for the U.S., although the U.S. hasn't, taken any steps against her. But, that can change again. There's been coups before in Honduras and even invasions by the U.S. Right. And again, on the other topic, so Castillo, of course, he's been under attack by the right-wing forces in Peru for a long time, even though he was elected by a pretty big margin, I think over.
Are you switching over to Peru now, or are we still talking about Honduras?
Yeah. So,
well, let's stick with Honduras and see what other people have to say about it.
Yeah,
I didn't follow that at all. What's the significance of what you just...
Again, remember, there were two separate heads of parliament elected, essentially. Neither of which happened legally because it didn't involve the entire parliament. So both were extra constituted, and so there was a whole confusion as to who's heading the legislature, and obviously that would mean legislation could not be passed. So again, essentially, there's a compromise where the person that the incoming president backed was it Cardona, I think. The guy on the right basically ceded after this negotiation to have him see they'll all vote for him as the member of the party that's coming in to power, because they won the elections by a pretty wide margin too. You're muted, Ken, so we can't hear you.
What's your prediction on it? Is this favorable for the newly elected president?
This is favorable for reforms for the left now. Again, it gets rid of a roadblock to Xiomara Castro actually implementing. There's going to be tough because there's a lot of reforms to implement. But now at least things are clear that there's she will have control of the majority of the legislature to actually push through some reforms. Which again, and she has she has got 57% of the votes, so she has a popular mandate. And a lot of Hondurans, after years of violence and repression, they want change, like as in many parts of Latin America. After the oligarchy essentially has been running things for so long, again, they want things to get better for them. They want reform. They want less corruption, less violence. So
okay,
there's a chance for her to do something, basically, at least politically.
Right. Alex, let me ask Victor what he thinks about this, and then Dennis, what's your comments about this unrest? And because this has been going on, you have the structural characteristics of the North and the South in Latin America big time, and then we've seen it manifest itself in these explosions of elections from below that have elected left governments for the past 50 years. But what do you think, Victor?
Well, I'm encouraged by the fact that there are an increasing number of left-wing electoral victories. And this is something that until 1970, when Allende was elected in Chile for the first time, this was a kind of unheard of thing. But now it's become quite common, and I think it's something to follow. Not all of them are equally radical. They differ greatly. And Peru, especially, is a country that has never had an elected left-wing leader. The closest thing they had to a kind of radical reform was under the military regime in the late 1970s, mid-1970s, Velasco Alvarado. But so I don't know to what extent, I haven't followed closely enough to know how strong the organizational backing is for Castillo, so it'll be interesting to watch.
Dennis, what do you think? Dennis?
Uh,
With the situation in Latin America.
can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Dennis.
One.
The situation is unstable and it's tending toward the left being empowered. And we just have to see how it goes over the next months and years.
Hmm.
It's been encouraging since Venezuela, since Venezuela with Hugo Chavez. That was the late 90s. I think it's encouraging for people on the left.
Okay. Ken, do you have any comments about this?
No.
Okay. Alex, let me hold tight a little bit. I wanted to shift to the right wing here. Talk about Canada, because it is indeed quite a phenomenon going on here. This is today from the CBC. This is Canadian Broadcasting, and hopefully it comes in there. Did it come in? Did you guys see this or not? No?
No?
Okay, now we
go.
got it.
Okay. Well, let's just hear what they have to say.
Be sure
about
to,
this. This is
forward the sound.
correct.
In terms of what's happening at the Ambassador
No.
Bridge right now.
Well, we do have some access to the Ambassador Bridge for U.S. bound truck traffic off what I would call a back entrance, but the main access point continues to be closed by the protesters, and anyone who is looking to cross the Ambassador Bridge from the United States into Canada, that access point is shut off entirely. And so it's worth noting that this is Canada's busiest international border crossing, about 10,000 trucks a day. A lot of commerce crosses this bridge, and being the home to the automotive capital of Canada, we are also home to a lot of just-in-time delivery for the auto and the auto parts sector, and having this kind of closure certainly can't last for very long.
Mayor Dilkins, are you able to put that into numerical context for us? Do you have any sense of how many cars are just sort of waiting to get through, how many trucks, and how much this is costing everybody?
Well, the commercial traffic that crosses every day is about $300 million. So it is a material number any way you cut it. And it's one thing to protest and to set up and be an annoyance in the streets of Ottawa. It's another to come in and shut down the international border crossing where a large majority of Canadian trade flows. And so we're doing our best. The Windsor Police are doing their best to work with the protesters. But I would submit that, you have some folks who are making irrational decisions, and you're trying to find a sensible or rational solution, but you're not working with rational actors in every case, and that further complicates the situation on the ground.
To the best of your knowledge, what are these protesters asking for specifically?
It really seems to be a hodgepodge. So there's some that are really held up with the whole vaccine mandate idea, and then it seems to have morphed to really an anti-government type protest. And it really touches all sorts of frustrations that some folks have with all levels of government, from the municipal government, provincial government, and all the way up to the federal government. And so I'm not sure that if you sat down and said, what are your top 3 issues, that you'd get the same 3 issues from 50 people if you sat them down. So it makes it frustrating to try and find a solution. But what we're trying to do right now is keep at least a lane open in each direction of traffic to and from the Ambassador Bridge so that commerce to our country and to the United States can continue.
You mentioned Ottawa just a moment ago, and that really has been the center of the conversation around these protests. We know in Ottawa it has really affected the operations of businesses, how people go about living their lives. People can't sleep. And I just wonder if you can put in relation what's happening in Windsor for you. Is it the same sort of thing? Are residential areas being impacted, or is this something sort of off in the distance, not really impacting businesses?
There are some residential homes not too far from Huron Church Road, which is the name of the road that leads to and from the Ambassador Bridge. And so we have received a number of complaints from residents today who had to experience, what I would call bad behavior last night. And so we're dealing with that. But I think from an Ottawa, if we're comparing Ottawa to Windsor in terms of the residential impact, it's much greater in Ottawa because there are just more people in their downtown area.
And Mayor, a lot of people who live in Windsor work in Detroit. And we're talking about essential caregivers, we're talking about nurses, there's all kinds of folks that need to get into the U.S. I imagine all of that is being impeded?
So that is certainly frustrating for a lot of folks. And during the pandemic, about 1,200 healthcare workers crossed from Windsor to work in Detroit each and every day. And at the beginning of the pandemic, when there was talk about closing the entire border down, including to essential workers at one point, we were told acutely that there would be hospitals in Detroit, entire hospitals, that would have to close down if those workers could not cross to get to work. And so we do have another option. We do own, the city of Windsor owns our half of the Windsor-Detroit tunnel. So there is access for vehicles to get through to Detroit, and that source, there is no backup there right now, but we have made contingency plans in the event that the blockade does try and get to the tunnel access point and block access to the Windsor-Detroit tunnel. We will still be able to get essential healthcare workers across to Detroit because the work that they do is helping to save lives, and it just can't be tolerated having that choked off. So we've got contingency plans there, and we hope not to have to use them, but we will if we need to.
What are you going to do, Mayor, if these protesters are like the protests we've seen in Ottawa and they say, we're not leaving? What's the plan? What are you going to do?
Well, I think we're going to do what most sensible people would say you should do, is try and negotiate a way through this, trying to, see if we can get access to and from the Ambassador Bridge, even if it's just one lane, to allow traffic to continue. That would be the most reasonable approach in the short term, but long term, this can't be sustained. This is too vital of an economic link to both nations, and something will have to be done, and it's vital to my own community with the just-in-time delivery in the auto sector. And so, we're going to work through this. We're going to be fair and reasonable to the extent that we can be, but this cannot be allowed to continue for very long, and certainly we're going to need some federal intervention. This is not a regular roadway in a municipal jurisdiction. This is a critical, essential route to an international border crossing that is the backbone of Canada's economy.
All right, so we have situations like this going on all throughout Canada. Ottawa is completely blockaded. Imagine if this is a tactic just adopted in the United States, where literally thousands of trucks go to Washington, D.C. and basically stop the functioning of the government, which could easily happen. Let me start off with Victor on this. What is your opinion about what's going on down there?
Well, I mean, it's, in a way, it's politically somewhat confusing. I mean, there was a good article in Jacobin, which pointed out the right-wing nature of what's sponsoring this, and pointing out the negative effect it's having on some of the Canadian truck drivers, especially pointing out that in Toronto and Ottawa, half the truck drivers are immigrants of South Asian origin, and they're suffering from this. So there's a division of interest among those who drive trucks. So it'd be interesting to know a little bit more about what's backing and who's backing the protesters. But I mean, the larger question this ties in with is one that exists also in the United States about whether there's some kind of realignment of right and left in a certain sense, because the right wing has been, in some respects, taking positions with which I at least can identify, like they're more skeptical about the aggressive stance of the U.S. towards Ukraine and so on. I mean, there's a pivot, you might say, that may be taking place, where the Democrats are, as my son had a neat formulation. He says the Democrats have become the party of diversity, inclusivity, and war, and the Republicans are becoming, albeit with a white racist constituency, the party of peace and freedom. The most interesting thing, I mean, this is getting a little bit away from the Canadian thing, but I think it's related because of the whole question of who these forces consist of. But I watched this show, which some of you might have seen, where Jimmy Dore appeared on Tucker Carlson's show. I don't know if you saw that. And amazingly enough, you didn't see that? It was a recent one, an hour-long interview. And some of Dore's progressive positions, Tucker Carlson agreed with. Certainly the skepticism about the military aggressiveness, but also what Dora said in favor of public works as opposed to handouts. And they point out the one disagreement, the areas of disagreement that they referred to were over immigration and abortions. So that was so. But I think there's a juggling or a compounding or shifting of alliances. And I mean, a lot of people have made this point. I was just hearing the beginning of a discussion with Jon Stewart, and they were talking about the QAnon, why people believe in the QAnon thing, and he was making the point that even some of the QAnon people, like other Trump voters, as we well know, had at a certain point, say in whether in 2016 or 2020, been supporters of Bernie, and then I guess it was 2016, and then when the Democrats sort of quashed Bernie, they went over to Trump. But in place of the kind of structural analysis that you might put forward to explain the ruling class perpetuation of its interests, they dream up all these wild stories, and they personalize it. And this is part of the culture and the way it maintains itself. I think the basic way the culture, the political culture, maintains a broad base of let's say tolerance is by creating a scenario of a kind of confusion in which one doesn't know which way to turn, because no matter which way one turns, with the Democrats or the Republicans, the popular interests are betrayed, and the Democrats are confused enough or conflicted enough within themselves so that they don't constitute a dependable force. Sorry, I've rambled a bit, but these are my thoughts when this kind of confrontation comes up.
Yeah, thank you. Very interesting. Now, let me just paraphrase some of the comments of Ara Madawi, who's a opinion writer at the Guardian, describing this. She described it as an astroturfed movement, one that creates an impression of widespread grassroots support where little exists, funded by a global network of highly organized far-right groups and amplified by Facebook's misinformation machine. The drama may be centered in Canada, but what is unfolding has repercussions for us all. And she describes here the fact that 10% of cross-border drivers have refused to be vaccinated, meaning that they cannot cross back and forth between Canada and the United States without quarantine. And so the Canadian Trucking Alliance has basically disavowed this protest. And they argue that they don't represent the vast majority of drivers of trucks, nor the sentiment of public sentiment in Canada, which 84% of the population have been vaccinated, compared to us, which is, I believe, 63%. But the question is, where are they getting the money for this? So the argument that's being made here is that we're basically, and this is her argument, and she quotes an article in MIT Technology Review, Facebook's most popular pages for Christian and Black American content were being run by Eastern European troll farms in 2020. According to an internal Facebook report written in late 2019, troll farms were reaching 140 million users every month. 3/4 of these users had never followed any of the pages. They'd had the content thrust upon them by Facebook's engagement-hungry content recommendation system. Now, again, I would not argue that, okay, it's being manipulated by Russia. I mean, I find that a little hard to believe. That's an interesting comment they make. But, of course, the right wing, of course, has many, many distinctive populist roots in our culture and in the United States. Dennis, what do you think about all this going on with these truckers in Canada?
My question is, where's the left? That's
Well,
I want that answer.
That's a good point. And, and we should note that some of our comrades on the left who are anti-vaxxers have joined in with these guys and marched. I won't name names, but I know some of us know who we're talking about here in New York, and they've gone and joined these demonstrations in Washington, et cetera. And it's sort of funny to imagine Mitchell Cohen marching with a bunch of guys with American flags. That sort of amuses me. In any event, what do you think about this, Kenny? What's your comments about all this?
Okay, I think it's embarrassing to the left that they pull out all of this name calling and accusations and, counterattacks because they're supporting the mandate for inoculations or for vaccinations. They don't want to hear anything as opposed to it. And 10% of the truckers, because it's the guy who's the head of the union said so, and he says, and the rest of the truckers, I speak for the truckers. Well, these people are speaking for themselves. They're going out. They didn't just block the bridge in Ottawa. They did a long journey from somewhere in Canada. They went like across the country. So it was a major effort. It's a working population. These are the working people revolting. And it's embarrassing how Justin Trudeau runs away and hides. And when he comes back to the public, he says, these dirty slime balls, these criminals, these Nazis. It's just throwing names around and will not meet or negotiate. And it threatens to pull in the army. And nobody recognizes this because they're, I would say most advocates or pundits on the left are unsure what side they're supposed to be on here because these are working class people revolting against the oppressive government. But wait a minute. They don't want it. They're opposed to the mandate. I'm confused. Whose side am I supposed to be on? So they're not truly supporting the rights of individuals, their right to protest and seek redress from the government where they consider the government as being oppressive by requiring truckers who spend 98% of the time in the truck by themselves, going back and forth to get the vaccine. And while government authorities are suppressing any information about negative effects from the vaccine, while government authorities acknowledge whoever gets COVID has a 99% chance of recovery and not dying, but they say you have to take the vaccine or your job is gone. You are fired. Your income is stopped. No compensation. Your family has a big problem now. Your wife is going to have to go out and sell sunglasses on the side of the road. Your kids are going to have to go sell oranges or maybe go to foster homes because we're not going to let you work as a trucker. We're not going to let you sit in that truck and drive unless you get this vaccine. So, okay, even if they're idiots, even if you completely disagree, do they have the right to do civil disobedience in advocacy of the position that they have? And does the government have the right to say, we decide to ignore you, and we have the right to get public video like you just played, to get pundits on there and denigrate you and say you're unreasonable, you're not sane, these are unrealistic requests, these people are idiots, these people, and then and even people like this is when we get to Joe Rogan, but this is Justin Trudeau throwing epithets at these people that are revolting when he goes and bends the knee for smaller sectors of the population, American India, Canadian Indians or something. Oh, he's very, very, very gracious. But these people who are hardworking people, driving trucks, working, having an income, paying taxes, supporting society, delivering goods back and forth, maintaining commerce. These people have not his people. So, it's very embarrassing to me that I don't understand. I thought the basic principle was freedom of speech means defending the rights of somebody to speak who you totally disagree with, not just somebody you like. I mean, I thought that's like basic. So I think it's embarrassing for the left. That's what I consider.
Right. Those are fair points.
Yeah. Call me crazy. Call me whatever you want.
There's
a long line of people who call me crazy. Don't worry. You got to go to the back of the line if you want to disagree with me.
Join the club. They're fair points. And I know from when I actually ran relocation companies in the 80s, and I would encounter characters who were independent entrepreneurs who owned trucks. Now, trucks are basically like buying a small house.
Right.
it's like a 60 to $70,000 investment. And these guys, let's say coming to New York City, usually they came to New York City in the early hours of the morning, because you only can enter New York City through certain routes. You have to drive down Broadway. You can't come across certain bridges and everything. And they, of course, had these completely ridiculous attitudes. They all were armed. They came in New York. They figured somebody's going to rip them off. But, they're in essentially like a fortress tank in a large vehicle like that. I mean, you're talking about like a 40-foot tractor trailer able to carry a whole bunch of different household goods. But they are a different kind of breed of animal. And I can imagine if you have that kind of a bunch of them up there in Canada acting like this, they're just hardworking, middle-class folks, work real hard. They're usually doing it with their wives, with their sons, or someone's accompanying them on long hauls, because they'll drive across the country all the time. And a certain percentage of them, I can understand how they react like this. And it always gets back to my problem with how people have been dealing and trying to understand the resentments and anger in the white working class since the 60s. But let me bring Alex in. Go on, Alex.
Well, first thing I'll say is from the left, I always heard that, hey, the way that we could get real change again is not necessarily through electoral politics, but through this kind of thing, through the ability of, people to get out in the streets and basically shut things down economically, and, state your demands. We're not leaving until, and we're not going to let the anything through, and we're going to inflict economic damage on you rich guys. So I just think we should be trying to figure out how we on the left do this in order to win some, $15 minimum wage and other real concessions. The other thing I guess I would say is, so whether or not you agree with the specific demands here, I mean, it's I think it suggests a way to again, as things could change. We just got to figure out how we can and there are other it shows their keynotes, like the other thing I remember is when they had the airports shut down because of the work stoppage there, years ago when Trump was trying to strong arm the workers there, and he totally caved essentially once people stopped coming into work. And then they just totally caved. So that shows again, another weakness of the capitalist system, essentially, that the need for goods to keep moving, especially. Oh, and the other thing I would say, this just shows the entire stupidity of just-in-time production, and how we really got to get rid of that and return to having, just for the good of the people, to having some warehouses and some stockpiles of key items, and just this whole, let's nickel and dime everything and not have any warehouse, anything in the warehouse, in case, hey, those computer chips we can't get anymore. And then, because one of these days, one of those supply issues is just going to totally shut down the entire economy. And, then we'll be screaming for, whatever widget we're not able to get.
All right. Well, that wasn't necessarily a pundit, Kenny. That was the mayor of Windsor, which is on the border with Detroit. And so, yeah, the just-in-time production thing, that, of course, has been introduced in big time since the 70s, when we had this whole debate about the Japanese introducing all sorts of different production techniques and beating us internationally. Victor, what's your opinion about that aspect of it, the political economy? Because, of course, we've seen international supply chains completely disrupted by the pandemic, and the just-in-time strategy has essentially fallen flat on its face in all sorts of ways. And look at the inflation rates. But what do you think, Victor?
Well, my main thought in that dimension is that I think the reliance on trucking is terrible, as opposed to much more reliance on rail. I mean, it's such a waste to have all those trucks, and then plus the spectacle in this protest. I mean, all these guys who were stopped in Ottawa and having to keep warm, and they must be having to keep their trucks idling all that time and burning all that fuel, and it's terrible. So it does dramatize the need. Well, it dramatized the irrationality of the whole system of truck transportation for these things. I mean, trucks are smaller trucks for local deliveries, fine, but long distance, the idea of having all these single vehicles go all the way across country is totally irrational to me.
Any other comments on this before we move on? Anybody else has anything to say about it?
I agree with Victor.
All right. I wanted to shift gears to the Ukraine situation.
The EU has agreed to provide, this is aid, not loan, 6 billion euros worth of aid over the next year or so, 1.2 billion euros immediately. So I think this amounts to basically a bribe of Zelensky, probably to do what the French and the Germans want, which I hope is, negotiate an end to this. But here's again from France 24, the press conference that Zelensky and Macron held after their meeting, and Zelensky will speak first, since obviously he's hosting, and then Macron, I think.
Шановний пане президенте, шановний Еммануель, пані та панове.
Mr. President, dear Emmanuel, ladies and gentlemen, dear guests and journalists, I am overjoyed to be able to welcome the President of the French Republic, Emmanuel Macron, in Ukraine. It's been 24 years since we had a visit from a French head of state, and we are honored by this visit, and we've been waiting for you, and we thank you for your personal support for Ukraine. It is true that our countries have been developing relationships in different domains, especially in the field of security. France has been playing a very important role in the Normandy format, and we truly appreciate Paris's position and Emmanuel Macron's personal position in striving for peace in Ukraine. This is an essential, a crucial question of our talks today, and we hope that in the very near future we will be able to reach all the goals that had been set in December 2019 and be able to have a new meeting of the Normandy format heads of states. We had a meeting between the political advisors that bore many fruit, and we expect that the meeting on the 26th of January 2022 and the Berlin meetings will be able to bring us closer to these goals. We have a common vision with President Macron of the current threats, the threats to Ukraine's security and to the world's security in general. What is needed is the unity of all the players and the end to the occupation of part of our territory is extremely important. Our partners' support to reinforce Ukraine's defense capacity is very important for the entire region. And the support from a security and an economic point of view by our European allies is crucial for us, and we really appreciate the West's position and the steps that they've taken. 1.2 billion euros in macro-financial help has been earmarked for Ukraine, which will help us stabilize our economy, and this is a very strong step in order to ensure stability and the economic resilience of our country. It is important that France participate in this large project, infrastructure project among others, and I'd like to underline the fact that France has been supporting the reinforcement of our infrastructure and to better our citizens' living conditions. We are working together to implement an important project in order to purify the water in the country and to guarantee access to clean, good quality patrol vehicles for border guards that are being constructed, and Airbus is also working in order to create air transport aircraft. And we have just signed an agreement with Oberon-Prom and the French company Thales.
I think those are a little bit more
have
different
signed a common declaration.
So let's skip over to when the
for welcoming
starts.
me here in Kiev in this moment of grave tension for your country. Since the Maidan revolution in 2014, the Ukraine has chosen the way of reforms and democracy, and this choice was made by the Ukrainian people. They mobilized to reach this goal, and the European Union has been supporting your efforts to transform your country, which are a guarantee of your sovereignty. You know that you can count on our support in this regard. For 8 years, Ukraine has already transformed itself considerably. And this path that is walking down, and this is something we mentioned together, this is a path that from which there is no turning back. I'd like to pay homage to the demonstrators at the Maidan and for the thousands of dead soldiers who died defending their homeland. They fought for Ukraine, and I don't want to simplify things here. President Vladimir, I'll say what I said yesterday in Moscow. In the current context, your stiff upper lip and the stiff upper lip that the Ukrainian people have shown when faced with the military aggression that your country is faced with inspires respect. We will continue our efforts to mediate together with Germany between Ukraine and Russia in order to put an end to this conflict. We have been able to talk with President Putin and with Chancellor Merkel in the Normandy format in 2019, and the 4 leaders of the Normandy format agreed on immediate measures that had to be implemented, in particular when it came to military issues. On the 26th of December, the 4 countries reaffirmed their commitment to implement the Minsk protocol in order to give Ukraine its territorial integrity, and this draws the path of peace. Yesterday, in my talks with President Putin, I brought up this topic, and he committed to respect the Minsk Accords. I would like to thank you for repeating to me in our exchanges that you also have the will to implement these very same agreements. This shared determination is the only path forward that will allow us to build peace, the only path that will allow us to find a durable political solution.
And let me know when you think we should stop.
That the foundation
I think we could stop now.
Minsk Accord of February.
So you kind of get the gist. First part is a bit of a love fest between the two of them, praising each other. But there appear to be signs that, negotiations may be getting somewhere. And that, and there's the pointing back to the Minsk Accords then as kind of the way out, possible way out. So how much progress, it's hard to see. Obviously, the Russians aren't pulling back any troops yet. And, of course, who knows if and when they'll do that. But, that would be a good sign, obviously. And, to quote Winston Churchill, jar jar is better than war. So any talking rather than fighting is a good thing, in my opinion. So.
Hey, Jim, are you ready to come back with your video?
No, let me just comment about this. First of all, what's interesting about, if you follow the people who are minutely focused in on Russian military movements, this is what political science calls signaling. There was a large formation, a combined arms army at Yelna, which is maybe 70 to 80 kilometers north of the Ukrainian border. That army has started to move south into staging areas. It's essentially in the area where the Ukrainian and Belarusian borders cross. The signaling has occurred. Two nuclear equipped bombers of the Russian Air Force flew into Belarus. So they're signaling back and forth, as is NATO of the United States. Because we know that the United States has deployed B-52 bombers to England, and they have sent the 3rd Brigade of the 82nd Airborne, that's being deployed into Poland, as well as elements of the 101st Airborne Air Mobile Division at Fort Campbell. That Ready Brigade is also being deployed into Romania and Bulgaria. And just so listeners understand, each of the 82nd Airborne always maintains a battalion of troops that can be sent immediately. It's called the Ready Battalion. They're at Pope Air Force Base at Fayetteville. They're ready to go immediately. And then behind them is the rest of the other brigade of the 82nd Airborne. There's 3 brigades in the 82nd Airborne, and they will follow within 72 hours. That same configuration is how the forces at Fort Campbell are organized. They're part of this overall command of the 18th Airborne Corps. So there's been the deployment of troops forward. There's been publicity to, again, openly moving through Russia. So keep in mind, these movements are not being secretly hidden from the public or the press. Another army from the Central Military District of Russia has now been seen moving from the Central Military District into Belarus. So all these signaling and all this is rather open in terms of everybody knowing about this. But and of course you have the now arrival into the Black Sea of a number of amphibious ships that have been traveling from the Baltic Fleet and the Northern Fleet for the past week. They were sighted about 4 or 5 days ago off the coast of Sicily, and now they're moving, and I believe they're some of them are already in the Black Sea. Others are at this point probably crossing the Bosphorus into the Black Sea. So all this signaling and posturing to obviously put political pressure on the Ukrainian government. Now, I listened to several discussions this week, last week, all over the place about the perception of Putin as a decision maker. And these are things to keep in mind. He is not a chess player. Some people say Putin's a chess player. What are his favorite sports? Judo and hockey. So what does that say about him as a person? Well, it means that he is tactically impulsive, tactically willing to take advantage. You know, anyone who plays judo, anyone who plays hockey knows that's a sport that's very tactically aggressive. Some people were interviewed that had actual discussions with decision makers around Putin. So they pointed out that Putin is very, very cautious when it comes to these kind of decisions. Very cautious. However, he can act impulsively. So that's something to keep in mind with the situation going on. But anyway, Victor, what do you think about what's going on with this whole thing?
Well, it's there's some confusion, of course. The main thing that I was struck by, I was extremely impressed by what seems to be a crack in the purely stenographic role of mainstream journalism when that AP reporter grilled the State Department spokesman about the charge that Putin was allegedly planning a false flag operation. And the State Department guy said, we have classified information. We'll say, what is the classified information? Well, it's just what I told you. I mean, going round and round in circles, obviously setting the stage for all kinds of lies. I mean, I think the U.S. is the aggressive party in this situation, and they're willing to promote lies just the way they did in 2003 to attempt to justify the invasion of Iraq. And that's what I'm most afraid of.
All right, Dennis, your comments about this.
It's unlikely that there'll be war. Putin does not want war. the aggressive party, I agree with Victor, is the United States. And we should be protesting in the streets against the United States because they're the warlike people. The Europeans do not want war. The Ukrainians in particular don't want war. And Putin doesn't want war. People who possibly want war are the U.S. industrial military, the military industries. They like this because it's going to raise their stocks and just more. They're making profits. What I call them are war profits here, steady war bucks. And we have a big problem there, and we have to stop it at some point, or else these are very dangerous times. And it's that nobody wants war except these people. And then they may not like war per se, but they certainly like the back and forth, the saber rattling. I'll leave it at that.
All right, thank you. And one thing interesting about this is this goes back to what we were discussing about the differences in opinion. I believe that Victor brought this up. The latest poll shows that Donald Trump voters are now more than twice as likely as Biden voters to say the conflict in the Ukraine is none of America's business. And when you actually, this is a poll that was conducted between the 3rd and the 7th of February. They found that 42% of Trump voters now say the conflict between Russia and Ukraine is none of America's business, as opposed to 60% of Biden voters, who now insist that it is in America's best interest to help Ukraine. The Trump voters now say, more Trump voters now say the United States should take neither country's side in the clash. Biden voters say the opposite, with more than 2/3 insisting the United States should side with Ukraine. Very interesting. Michael, your comments about all this. You just joined us.
I'm having trouble getting Michael to unmute, so I don't know. There he is.
Oh, there you go.
Hello, Michael.
I have a very tenuous grip on this Zoom meeting right now,
Ah,
so I could be knocked off at any time.
Oh, I
However-
felt that. It's tickling.
we could
Okay.
generalize from that. Anyway, go on, Mike.
Yeah. On reality also, but no, all this reminds me. I mean, I don't think that you can put the entire blame on the United States here. And also, I saw that poll also, but the Trump supporters are just isolationists. The only time they think that America should get involved in somebody else's problem is if it's a country full of minorities or something. Then we should go and crush them. No, I have no use for the opinion of the Trump supporters. They're entitled to it, but they're just isolationists. All of this stuff that's going on right now reminds me of actually during the Korean War, when the peace talks started at Panmunjom. A lot of the military actions that were taken were really just maneuvers to strengthen that particular side's position in the peace talks. And I think that's what's going on here. It's just jockeying for position as far as negotiations. At least I hope that's all that's going on. Yes, Putin has the option to, at this point, at any time, to send the troops in and invade. But I think what he's hoping for is just, shall we say, the intimidation factor, the idea of, getting more out of negotiations by threatening more, by posing a bigger threat. If that's the case, then there probably wouldn't be, hopefully wouldn't be a war or an invasion. But again, there's the problem of, when everything's on a hair trigger, one mistake and everything blows up. So hope for the best and expect the worst. Prepare for the worst.
Well, as Clausewitz says, war is politics except by other means. But anyway, let's bring Kenny on. Kenny, your comments about all this.
Generally speaking, I agree with exactly what Michael said. I think this is just posturing. I don't think Russia can afford the cost of an incursion into the Ukraine, a prolonged incursion. Forget about what they get done in a week or a week and a half. They'd have to persist and occupy, and it'd be a long, expensive occupation. And they would lose the support of many countries that they're trying to negotiate with. And all they'd be setting is, we're the big bully on the block. So why don't you buy some of our gas? Otherwise, maybe we're going to punch you in the head. That's not going to work. So I don't see it happening. I don't agree with Michael's statement that Trump people who do something he agrees with, but he doesn't believe it. So I think Trump actually, when he was in office, was making a major part of his agenda was
wait, Kenny, what was it?
Disengaging. You said that you don't believe Trump people saying they don't want to get involved in the Ukraine.
No, that's not what I said.
Oh, what did you say?
I said they're isolationists. I said, I don't care what they're saying because they just have a totally isolationist position. So they
okay.
negated themselves.
Okay, great. So yeah, he had an isolationist position too. So anyhow, in any event, I agree with that. We shouldn't be. Right now we're spending lots of money, so more aid to Europe, more aid, while we still have homelessness in the U.S., a border problem, an epidemic, lack of low literacy with a great part of the population, and an obesity and an opioid epidemic and so forth and so on. You don't have to leave the continent to find lots of things to deal with. And this is just use of foreign adventure to pull attention away from domestic difficulties, which is an old strategy, isn't it? If you're losing on the domestic arena, foment some horrendous thing going on in international things, either a calamity like a tsunami or an earthquake or a flood or a war or a massacre like Rwanda, and that'll get the press. They got to get the news off of unemployment, inflation, or whatever else the problems are here. So maybe that's what's behind all of this, and Putin's doing the same thing. I think that's all. He's in essence what they're doing with this international stuff is like saying, "Oh, okay, we're going to play this game. We're going to play this game. It's a 7-card stud, and that's the game we're playing because I'm throwing lots of money on the table, and here we go. So cover this and stop covering the other stuff." I think that's more or less what's happening from a layman's viewpoint. Thank you.
Actually, it's interesting. Andrei Sushtentsov, who's the dean of the School of International Relations at basically an elite, it sort of agrees with you, Kenny. He runs a foreign ministry outfit in Moscow, and he quotes this. He expects this crisis will be with us for all of 2022. And he describes his current standoff, this is in the New York Times, as only the first step in a drawn-out Russian effort to force the West to agree to a new security architecture for Eastern Europe. Remember, the demands that were made in December were essentially, the United States and NATO to get the hell out of Eastern Europe. It was a characterization of the start of a more high-stakes phase in Russia's years-long conflict with the West that is gaining currency in Moscow's foreign policy circles. Russia's aim, according to Sushtenov, is to keep the threat of war ever present and thus compel negotiations that Western officials have avoided until now, which, I have to admit, I am a realist. I do define myself in the realist camp on international relations, so I tend to buy that argument. But Alex, what do you think?
I generally think it's a plausible argument. I could see that happening again, drawn out. Again, it depends on what, as we keep saying, on what Putin wants. He kind of has the initiative here to continue the crisis or to de-escalate, or but of course, again, the U.S. and Europe will also, especially the French and the Germans, will play their role And so, yeah, again, it's a multi-sided kind of game here, or struggle. So who the hell knows which way it could go at this point? It's incredibly complicated, so it's hard to judge.
Well, the other issue is that, the question of tolerating a state like the Ukraine, which probably, Putin's advisors, the close advisors Putin has, it's sort of interesting. Another person, a friend of mine, actually characterized, well, here you got the FSB as one of his close advisors, the head of the FSB, the new name for the KGB, a lot of hard line jingoistic type hawkish advisors. They describe these guys close to Putin. And basically, if that was the case in the United States, someone, I sort of was laughing at this because this is sort of a mainstream liberal type realist in the IR field. He's describing, well, we would accuse it of being the deep state under control, which I sort of laughed at because, I know that people always go along with a deep state argument all the time. The argument by Shostenov, which is another point of view, is like basically, let's keep the suspense, this feeling of a pre-war situation. He said, people are spoiled by an overly long peace. They think of security as a given, as something that is attained for free, rather than something that must be renegotiated. This is a mistake. Now, remember, the Russians, I go back to that piece in Los Angeles Times in 1993 when Jim Baker said, let's include Russia in NATO. All right. That was sort of an argument being made at the later stages of the Bush 1 administration. Obviously, he's out of power in 93. And the idea that they had with Yeltsin was to sort of try to do that throughout the 90s. And then, of course, Putin comes in. And Putin, we can deal with, there's one of the things that's never been answered to me is who blew up all those apartment buildings months after he comes in, because Putin, of course, immediately goes into full Action Jackson mode to take over the media in Russia, and that happens right away. Remember, the oligarchs in the media get thrown in jail right away. Within 2 to 3 years, he takes over the media. So, again, we'll see what happens with this. Any other comments before we move on to another issue?
I'd just like to say that I hope the peace movement revives. And there were demonstrations on Saturday in many locations in the U.S. I saw on the Code Pink website. I was disappointed that even Democracy Now! Did not mention that.
Interesting. She didn't mention that on Monday, huh?
Nope.
Interesting.
Well, some of I know Katie Halper and a bunch of the other, left podcasters did, and had people on from the anti, Code Pink and so on to talk about it. So there at least was that.
All right, let me shift to another issue here, and this is sort of the post-war situation about how we're viewing Afghanistan. I'm no fan of the Taliban. I never was, never will be. I also was somebody who early on was very skeptical in meetings. I was brought into the Council on Foreign Relations of all places after 9/11. The head of the National Security Program in the Council on Foreign Relations brought us in and said, well, what should we do? All right. And all of us, everybody sitting there, I was the only one who'd never been in Afghanistan. Everybody else had been in Afghanistan. They all expressed great skepticism in committing American power to join with the Northern Alliance. And now, of course, we see 20 years later what happened. But what we're dealing with right now is a issue that I don't think Biden can politically get behind, given everything that's going on domestically. But this is the fact that, I don't have to tell everybody, and let's the BBC say it, this is the issue of starvation right now in Afghanistan, which is quite pervasive. And all we do is hear the studies, and hopefully this will play. But what we're talking about is the fact that there's literally millions of people who are subjected to starvation. And hopefully this is the BBC talking about this. And as you can see, it's doing the old fun buffering.
I want to reload it, Jim. Maybe that'll work.
All right, let me do that as we're saying. But before we get into that, I'm sure it's kind of curious as to what people think about this. I mean, I personally think that Biden should take the moral high ground and basically start shipping food to the people of Afghanistan. I think that, and the same, I personally think that a policy towards the vaccine problem internationally is screwed up, because I think we should be actively producing enough vaccines to basically inoculate the entire world. I mean, and that of course gets into the question of what's the use of power and the nationalistic attitudes of how we're deploying the sort of politics of vaccination. But first, let's deal with Afghanistan.
And by the way, Jim,
yeah,
just to slip this in there, you do realize that Johnson & Johnson said they're going to cut back production of their vaccine. Not that they had the best of the bunch, but they said that they were actually going to cut back production. I think they said that today. And of course, what that means for getting the vaccine out to the rest of the world. Just thought I'd slip that in.
All right. Well, thank you, Michael. But let's start with Victor. Victor, what's your opinion about this issue of food for Afghanistan?
I think it's extremely urgent. I certainly support sending food to Afghanistan. And I would add that the food is much more important than the vaccines. And one of the odd or say ironic conditions is that many of the poorest countries in the world have much lower rates of COVID than the U.S. But their big problem all over is just basic necessities of life. So that's what the emphasis has to be on.
Other comments?
Yeah.
Oh, you go.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Alex. I want to be on.
I
want to be on the
last. Okay.
I want to be on the tail here.
We 100% with Jim on both points, and to say, this is, although I'll go further and say that some of the sanctions should be lifted temporarily, or at least something like the UN program they had with Iraq, oil for food. They need something like that again to allow some of their money to be used to buy food. Again, the problem is that over the past few decades, Afghanistan has really become dependent on imported food to feed their population, just because of in part because of global warming and how the climate has changed, especially the shift over to more opium production and less actual food crops. So, and it also shows, of course, in the general point that sanctions don't work. They don't even succeed at what we think they do, that they punish the regime we don't like. I can't think of any case, where it succeeded in, Iran or wherever, in leading to the overthrow of the government in recent decades. So it doesn't work in that way. It just hurts the people that, we're supposed to be trying to liberate from whichever evil regime we don't like.
Right.
So, there's a more general policy prescription there. But certainly we should food, we can think of other, like Ethiopia in the 80s where, even though it was like a communist government then, right, Jim, that we shipped food to them. And so...
Well,
I don't see how this is different. Yeah.
That's a whole different situation. Let me share the piece I finally got up. It's interesting to deal with the good old internet here. This is the piece that was on the BBC today. Let me play it, and I will share the screen.
Just under 6 months after the Taliban took power, Afghanistan is facing the worst humanitarian crisis in the world.
In cities like Kabul, there's no
actual shortage of food, but people don't have the cash to buy it. As a result, up to 8 million people are facing starvation. The economy has simply collapsed. The West has frozen Afghanistan's financial assets, nearly $10 billion worth. And because the Taliban are still classed as a terrorist organization, sanctions have been imposed which mean the country has run out of cash.
It's a very difficult and challenging time for the people of Afghanistan, but the core need is to help them revive their own economy, their own livelihood, and that is not possible without the state.
Nazir Kabiri was a minister in the previous government, but he felt it was his duty to stay on and work with the country's new masters. One senior British military figure believes it's time to work with Britain's former enemies in order to protect the Afghan people.
I think the West is going to end up recognizing the Taliban government. If that's the case, then we better get on with it sooner rather than later. There's a great phrase, be magnanimous in victory. I think this is an occasion for us to be magnanimous in defeat.
This is Khosan, outside the city of Herat. On top of everything else, over the past 4 years, Afghanistan has suffered from a devastating drought. People here can't grow their own food any longer. Now they have to queue for handouts.
I feel terrible for my people. It's so sad to see how dependent people are and how desperate people are. It's one of the most difficult times I've ever seen in my life.
The UK government says it's providing £286 million in aid, but the situation is increasingly desperate. Famine added to economic collapse. I've been reporting on Afghanistan for more than 40 years, but I don't think I've ever felt before that I might be watching the destruction of a nation. And you know what? These people have been through so much in the past decades, and they simply don't deserve it. John Simpson, BBC News, Khosan.
All right, so that's the BBC today talking about all this. Michael, your comments about all this?
Yeah, and that's a good idea because I'm about to lose my connection. This is, I think that the thing can be solved very easily, in my opinion. It's actually not that easy, but seemingly easily, by simply saying we will get food to the Afghan people, but simply by bypassing the Taliban government. To simply say we will make direct shipments of food. We've done it in the past. Both we've done it and Britain has done it, where we actually didn't go through the government. We said we're going to make you have to allow our flights to come in and for us to give the food. The Taliban, of course, have to allow that. But basically, instead of giving the food or the money to the Afghan government, to just say we will take the food in directly and we will distribute it. So that's one way where we would not be working with the Taliban government, and we would also be getting food to the people and hoping to mitigate this situation. And with that, I probably have to leave you because I'm going to be cut off again in a minute. So I will see you all tomorrow.
All right, thank you, thank you, Michael. Dennis, did you Dennis, you have a comment about this?
Yeah, it's a humanitarian crisis in order to be intervened with.
Okay. Anything else?
No.
All right, thank you. Let Kenny. Kenny, you wanted to have the last word on this. Go on, Kenny. I know you're going to give us a Malthusian lecture. Go on, Kenny.
Well, there's 2 points to it. I'm going to really, Jim, cut me off if I go on rambling too long. The first thing is that
I'll never do such a thing, Kenny. Go on.
Okay, I appreciate that video because we got some information from watching the video. The first thing is the fabrication of an idea. The announcer or the narrator said, or somebody said, this is the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. Now I'll put how much money I wish I could bet on that. It's obviously not the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. He just said it was. As a number one. Number two, there's food in the streets. He said so. Nobody has any money to buy it. But the food was there, the piles of oranges and bananas or whatever else. Number two. Number three, I want anybody on this panel to explain to me what's the 20-year plan on providing the Afghans with food. What happens? How does this work? We just provide them for food for 20 years, 40 years, 50 years, and whatever? I mean, how does this work? What is the point? What are you getting at? What do you do by providing them with food? How does it solve anything? I don't get it. That's what I'd like to hear. Not like, oh, this child is starving. I got to give him something to eat. I want to know what happens when that child becomes 40 and has 6 kids. How much more food do you send? What is your solution? And you want to maintain, you want to acknowledge the sovereignty of that country, their rights to govern or misgovern the way they want. We cannot intercede. We're imperialist. Stay out. Don't fix the government. Don't put in any kind of management system or anything. Just send the food there. What are you doing? Nothing. Anybody, please explain that to me. I'd love to hear the answer.
All right, let's smack him down. Okay, Alex, you start off there, Alex.
Okay, well, part of that is, yeah, you can't dictate another country, even, I mean, we spent the last, whatever, not just 20 years, but years before that.
But they weren't starving to death when we were there.
Attempting, showing that you can impose democracy or, a government that we like on another country. Mm-hmm. So at some point you gotta be like, well, if that doesn't work, then you gotta work with what you have in terms of, and then, do we want to, essentially be like the infamous 60 Minutes episode with Madeleine Albright saying, it's worth it to have 500,000 Iraqi children die from, malnutrition and lack of medicine. It's, that's just it's necessary for our policy. I mean, that's, so you can't, we're stuck with the Taliban to a great deal. Again, the other option is, let millions of, how is millions of Afghans dying going to make things better? It could revive a refugee crisis. And then, well, hey, all those right-wingers in Europe suddenly get empowered by that. And we get more, Viktor Orban types. Maybe we get the the literal fascists in charge of France or Germany. I mean, the AfD and Le Pen are out there. So I just don't think that's, that's what you could end up with if you just throw up your arms and let them starve.
Victor, what's your comment on all this?
Well, I mean, we're in a difficult situation. On the one hand, you have the option of just people starving. On the other hand, you have the option of a dependent sort of charitable relationship. But I would like to go outside that sort of defeatist situation and imagine something different, which is to see this as an international problem, which will depend on input not just from the US, but from many other countries, and notably including China. And this would be an opportunity. I'm not saying that this is something that politicians are thinking of now, but it's something that should be raised, because China's approach to other countries has always been, and I'm thinking of its approach in Africa, has always been to encourage them to develop their own means of providing for themselves. And I think if this is what's necessary in Afghanistan, and the Taliban does not seem to be capable of doing that. So, but on the other hand, there's such a crisis, and if there was some kind of international gathering focused, of people with authority, focused on providing the basis for the beginning of some kind of recovery in Afghanistan, which ultimately has to depend on its own development of its people's own capacity to produce for themselves. I think that's the direction, that's the only possible direction to get out of this situation, however far-fetched it may seem.
All right, thank you, Victor. Let me just share something that has to do with domestic politics in the United States. This is from the New York Times today. This is a decision of the Supreme Court. And I don't think we really need to argue this that much, because I'm pretty sure we all agree about this. This is a decision that basically restored a voting map in Alabama that essentially disenfranchised black voters. And this is a decision that reinstated this congressional map The lower court said it diluted it. The vote was 5-4, with Justice John Roberts joining the three liberal members in dissent. And I just wanted to put that up because, I've been watching the reaction of the Republican Party to a black Supreme Court female nominee, which is essentially quite absurd, listening to their kind of arguments that they're making. And before we move to the Spotify issue, which is a very important issue, and I think we'll have a lot of interesting opinions about that, what do people think about this? These further attacks on disenfranchisement of voters. Frankly, to me, it's, it sort of brings up the red, white, and blue and down in there in my head. Totally un-American type of shit to do, and just really pisses me off when I see this kind of thing going on. But Victor, what do you think about this? Just calculated all the time. Let's disenfranchise. Let's keep control in the House and the Senate and down at the lower levels of state and local government, going on all over the country. With, as we know, there was I'm quoting a study that the RNC actually did about 2 years ago, which they were afraid that they were going to lose control of the House and the Senate in 2024 and 2022 and 2026. They're thinking that the demographic changes are going to start to tilt negatively in their direction, which was very interesting to read. I was reading it in the middle of the midterms. But what do you think, Victor, about this constant barrage all the time, non-stop, about disenfranchising voters to be able to vote?
Well, it's quite alarming. I don't know if I have anything original to say about it. I mean, it's been going for quite a while. I talked about it in my book, Democracy Denied, from 2019, but it's been going on for quite a while. It reflects the alarm of the Republicans at the demographic change in the country and their determination to keep as much as possible the power in the hands or let's say out of the hands of the people of color, especially the poor people generally. Basically, I mean, the racist aspect is used as part of the justification, what they draw on for public support. But what they're really afraid of is the economic policies that would be put through by a government that was elected by the total electorate. And this is what they're afraid of. So it's a continuing process, and I don't see any easy way out of it. I mean, it's again, like everything else, like with the need for a peace movement, it's going to depend on a really massive organization and rejecting this whole process.
Okay, Dennis, your comments about this voter disenfranchisement issue. Dennis? Let me move to Kenny. Kenny, your comments about it.
Oh, I agree with Victor, absolutely. The Republicans are afraid if you give the majority of the population, which is obviously below the 50% mark, because in terms of income or GDP, they're going to vote for more socialist distribution of income. And that's frightening to the landlords and the property owners and the elitists, the people who own industry and are living off of passive income. I totally agree with you. That's what's happening. And then on the other side, the Democrats are fighting to have control over that and say, we want more people, we need more, this is it, let's get the vote and distribute it broadly, prisoners, non-citizens and so forth and so on, so that they get the power and then can push those socialist agenda. That is a conflict that's going on. I agree with Victor, absolutely. And, disenfranchising voters by eliminating them from the voter rolls. Or currently what they're doing, I think, is limiting the number of drop boxes so that you can make more certain that the people are not stuffing the ballot boxes with mail-in votes that are questionable because they come from nursing homes or wherever. Voter harvesting, they call it. So those are techniques which are kind of populist, which get more people voting. But the Republicans say we can't win like that. We'll lose control. And the masses will have control, and then they'll put, everybody gets a bag of popcorn and a free ride on the roller coaster. And, so You're right. That's what's going on. Absolutely. But I do want to make a comment about the last topic. I didn't think that anybody gave me a satisfactory answer. Some people try to make, oh, you know, I'm as moral. I have as my virtue is comparable to Mother Teresa. I have compassion for these people that are starving to death. And while people were just talking about that, I found a website that says the Afghan starvation is number 2. Number 1 is Congo. Democratic Republic of Congo is the worst place for humanitarian calamity right now. So, you know, and then there's 9 other places. So there's calamities going on all over the world. And if you're going to help Afghanistan, what are you going to do for the people in Yemen? Or what are you going to do for the people in, you know, Argentina or Venezuela that are starving to death? And so forth and so on. So what's your policy? What's your answer? At least the Romans, when they tried to conquer Europe, said, look, we're in charge. Less people are going to die. More people are going to be happy. Or China's doing the same thing. We know how to do it. Let's watch out. Let us take over. If you don't agree with that, then you're going to have to suffer the consequences that there's going to be some people are going to win, some people are going to lose, because that's the price you have to pay for freedom. You take a chance. You don't have a guarantee. Oh, and let me, I will rant a little bit on that. That's the difference when you work as a contractor or on a W-2. If you work as a W-2, you know, you're going to get paid every week, whether you sit there and play video games or you actually do something productive. But if you're on a 1099 and you're a contractor, you don't produce, you're gone. If nobody wants what you got, you're out of business. So you take a risk and you go each way, or a government job or a public. So life is full of risks. So in any event, you know, I have empathy for people. I don't like step on cockroaches all day, or, you know, or kill dogs, or, you know, I feed dogs and cats, and I love people, and I like strangers, and I like everybody, and it's all great. But you can't say, you know, you're very, very liberal with other people's money. You want to say the U.S., which you mean the U.S. taxpayer, should be sending food to Afghanistan because they have food, but they can't afford to buy it. Explain that to me. Who's responsible for them not being able to buy it? It's sitting there.
Yeah.
Where's the, you know, what's going on? Give me a little bit more background.
Sanctions, Ken.
Sanctions. Oh,
we
sure. The U.S. is starving them.
We took the government's money away, remember?
You know,
what has that got to do with it? They're sitting there. Food is sitting there.
Well, actually, Kenny, that's a good question. You know, the question of the issue of how the public views sending help abroad. That's a very good question.
Okay, yeah.
Of course, I wouldn't equate you or me with Mother Teresa.
Okay, right.
But you know, I when you bring up the Romans, I think was it Agricola who said they made a desert and they called it peace? Is that correct?
That's Tacitus, Jim.
Tacitus.
Germania.
Yeah. Right. To Tacitus in the I guess it was in the response to the destruction of the regions in the Teutondad.
Well, the roads are still there, right?
Well, yeah.
The Roman roads are still there. So, any event, getting back to what we're just talking about, it's absolutely true. The Republicans, and not only that, they controlled the votes after they get in behind into the digital universe. They corrupted the voting thing during the Bush administrations. They were shocked when Obama won. You know, they felt it was like, this can't be. What happened? We're controlling the ballots. How did that happen? And they felt the same way with Trump getting in. This is sacrilegious. You know, I mean, the Democrats felt that way. So, you know, it goes back and forth. There's a tremendous amount of corruption in voting on various scales. And I worked for 2 years on voting integrity in the local elections in Carson, where they count the votes and what they do. And they didn't even have a chain of custody. And, you know, it's all kinds of levels with voting. Now, the biggest voting fraud that I see is when you go in and there's 47 things you got to vote on, and they're all backwards and upside down, and you don't know, and they're misidentified. And there's, you know, the Glory for America campaign.
That's how it is with your California referendums.
That's right, California referendums. And there's so much different things. It's terrible. So, you know, it's a big thing. It isn't just who votes or who's allowed to vote. It's a circus. My son get it. He said, and I'll put this into the public. The big loophole or problem in democracy is, it's not a loophole, big target in democracy is who gets elected. The guy who tells the biggest lie in the best way. That's who gets elected. The most charming guy with the biggest lie, hey, when I get elected, you are going to be 3 feet taller, and your wife is going to be prettier, and your car is going to run, and the gas is going to be cheaper, and, there's a war, and it's over, and peace, and we're all going to get along, and that's why you should elect me. And that, the biggest liar wins. I'm sure you would agree with that for Trump getting elected, because Hillary's a pretty big liar, but she couldn't compete with Trump. So he got elected. So,
all right, well, let's talk about another aspect of distorting the truth, if you will.
Oh, yeah, you want to go to Joe Rogan?
Yeah, let's go to Joe. Now,
I want to play some clips on Joe Rogan before we get your propaganda.
All right, well first of all, make some general comments about this. This conflict, as you know, has been going on. And one of the differences they make between Spotify is Spotify basically pays him $100 million a year for his podcast. And this particular podcast is, of course, wildly popular. I think, is Rogan's the most popular talk show host?
He gets 1 million viewers.
He's got 25 million subscribers.
So he is basically up there. And then, of course, the question is, they're saying, well, we are not a media company. We're just basically streaming them. Yeah, right. All right. So then, of course, you had in the late part of January, you had Neil Young and Joni Mitchell pull their music. And then you had another podcaster, Brene Brown, who said that she would not release any more episodes until further notice. Then further on, you had Prince Harry and Meghan Markle introduce their comments where they expressed concern about COVID-19 misinformation. So that's been part of this mixture. And then, of course, you're talking about literally serious money involved. Now, I'm not sure if Kenny has this. I'm going to start off with Indy Airy. And if, I duplicate you, okay, fine. You don't have to play it. Now, this is Indy Airy making the comments about Joe Rogan.
Who the hell is that? Who is she? Who is she?
She's a performer. She's a performer. And
this singer?
Singer, correct. And this is her explaining why she decided to boycott Spotify. So let's hear what.
Yeah, fine. Here about why I decided to ask my music be pulled off of Spotify. So check this out.
No white people. Says, okay, take me to this one. And the guy goes, okay. I goes, is that in a good neighborhood? He's like, oh, yeah. Guy barely speaks English.
There, we get out, and we're giggling. Oh, we're going to see Planet Apes. We walk into
Planet of the Apes. We walked into Africa, dude. We walked in the door, and there was no white people. It says, okay, take.
I empathize with the people who are leaving for the COVID disinformation reasons, and I think that they should. I also think that Joe Rogan has the right to say what he wants to say. I also think that I have the right to say what I want to say. So as an artist who builds, Spotify is built on the back of the music streaming. So they take this money that's built from streaming and they pay this guy $100 million, but they pay us 0.003% of a penny. Just take me off. I don't want to generate money that pays this. Just take me off. That's where I'm at. And I know that I'm actually, to be honest with you, surprised that my statements were picked up, because I thought people weren't really going to listen to me, because that's what I'm used to from the industry. But I'm glad that I am being heard, and for that reason, I want to clarify my statements. Again, this is why. Watch this.
The nigger thing. Yes. Saying the word nigger. You've already said nigger. D is just like nigger. Saying nigger. She's calling you a nigger. It's like this boy that he's a nigger, but starts calling them niggers. Word nigger. There should be a word like nigger, especially like the word nigger. That's our nigger. About niggers. He says nigger. Guy, a nigger. And then our niggers start saying nigger. Allowed to use the word nigger. Out the word nigger. See nigger. Word nigger. Say nigger, and he couldn't say nigger. And most nigger.
So we know how social media can be. Things can be doctored, people are taken out of context. It's happened to me many times. However, I want to be clear, in no uncertain terms, where I stand on this is that he shouldn't even be uttering the word. Don't even say it under any context. Don't say it. That's where I stand. It's my right to stand there. I have always stood there. I have other feelings about it, but those are nuances that are not meant for this moment. He shouldn't even be saying it. And so the confluence of energies comes into play here. So now we have this person who is offensive to a lot of people, who's paid $100 million. Spotify, the backbone of Spotify is the music. So you pay the musicians that are the backbone of your business 0.003 to 0.005% of a penny, and you take this money that you generate over here, because all the rest of it goes somewhere. The subscription fees go somewhere. So you take this money that's generated over here and you use it to invest in this guy. Do what you want, but take me off. Or pay me too. And I don't just mean me, I mean us. Artists like me, pay us too. Pay podcasters of color too. So Artist Relations from Spotify called me yesterday and they asked me what I want, and I've been thinking about this all night. I'm not gonna say it all here, but what I wanna say to you is something that I already knew, but I want you to know that they said it last night. Most of the streams on Spotify are Black music, but we know that if you're paying attention at all, you understand the role of Black music in this world. So that's a deeper nuance.
Hey, thank God! It's finally done.
All right, so why
I thought it was going to go on for another half an hour.
You have an opinion, Ken.
Let's see what you dug up on this issue. Go Rogan, Kenny.
All right, just give me a moment. I've got it here.
And it's really too bad we don't. Playthell has a colonoscopy tomorrow, so he's out of action.
Oh boy!
I have to play two. I'm going to go ahead and do it. Let's see. Hopefully, I can do the next one. Let me get through the ad here before I share it. Pause it, and make sure this is the right one. I'm not hearing Joe Rogan here.
No.
Okay, yeah.
Oh.
This is about Spotify, but it's 6 minutes. So let's see. It's kind of informative about it. So let's see what it says.
We're not hearing it, Ken.
You're not hearing it?
We're not hearing the.
Okay. Wait a second. You're right. Because I didn't do what I always
do the
demand you to do. 1 second.
Okay. Oh.
I'm guilty. Let me get.
And so while we're waiting, we should.
No, here it comes. Here it comes. You got it now,
when
right?
I look at this, we've really expanded the opportunity also on the top line for the company. So we're now talking publicly about getting to over 50 million creators of this company and over 1 billion user opportunity. And I feel more confident than ever with our audio first strategy that we will get there. And when you look at that business long term, that business will be substantially bigger than the one that we were talking about in.
Go back to this Rogan situation for a minute, because cultivation of content creators is so key to the long-term growth of Spotify.
Is to have as much content as we is balancing creative expression with, of course, the one about the safety of our users. And that's also why we published this weekend our policies, and really for the first time did that. And that's probably on our half something we should have done earlier, and that's on me. But we have them out there now so that everyone can look at these policies and understand what goes on our platform. And our goal, obviously, is to have as much content as we can. And we're going to try to do everything that we can to build the best possible experience for creators where they can interact and engage with their fans and monetize those relationships.
Daniel, you understand that I think there are many people who are trying to figure out whether you are a pandemic stock, so to speak, Peloton being the worst example, but a lot of companies where people were cooped up, they were listening, they were looking for something to do, they moved to a house, and as they did work, they took Spotify, and now that group of people is no longer growing. When you look at how many users you have or are getting, you understand that people are very concerned that the first quarter represents an opening quarter in the worldwide economy, and that what you might be thinking is that Spotify won't do as well, and it's not just business as usual. How do you address that concern?
No, I totally understand that, Jim. But what I would say is actually, it is true we were impacted by the pandemic. And you saw that in our last year in Q1 and Q2. But if you look at the back half of that year, the Q3 and Q4 numbers, those were really just outstanding numbers. And Q4 specifically, we had our record content now on Spotify. It has and will have in the coming days a COVID advisory tag that talks about how we can push that to a COVID hub, where there will be a lot more information from experts and health authorities next to all content, no matter who you are, that talks about COVID-19. And that's really what the scientific community was asking about as well. So I feel good about that. But obviously, I think it's important to point out that as platform goes, this is an evolving safety landscape. And obviously, we're going to evolve with that too. And that's a dialogue that we're constantly having with authorities, with experts, with the medical community, as well, of course, with the legal community. So this is an important topic, but I don't think it's unique to Spotify. I think it's true for all platforms. And obviously, we take our role here very seriously.
Daniel, David, again, to sort of end this off, talking about margins again, obviously something that we...
Okay, so they're all talking
the way
about
we look at this is we provide an excellent value.
Let me stop that. And... stop that, and I just want to play this one other one. Joe Rogan and Spotify. Joe Rogan on Spotify. Let's see if this is the one I'm looking for. No, that was taken down. Whoa.
Really?
Oh, no, here we go. This is very significant. Just give me a second.
Mm-hmm.
Wait a minute. I didn't start sharing this yet, right? So
no.
Okay, you're going to like this. Don't faint, please. Don't faint. Sit down, relax, have a sarsaparilla, relax. Here it comes.
Things with Jen Psaki, and we simply, if you don't, you may have missed this. We played it before because it was really one of the amazing moments in American politics. Not enough people noticed it. Jen Psaki, from the podium in the White House briefing room the other day, called on Joe Rogan's boss, Spotify, to censor Joe Rogan. Here's what she said.
This disclaimer, it's a positive step, but we want every platform to continue doing more to call out mis and disinformation while also uplifting accurate information. But ultimately, our view is it's a good step, it's a positive step, but there's more that can be done.
So what the apologists have told us for the past 4 years, as we point out censorship after censorship after censorship, book burning, it's all totally fine because the government's not doing it. This has been National Review's position for 5 years. As long as it's not the government, then really, says David French, the First Amendment doesn't apply. But here you have the government, the president's own spokeschick, demanding censorship, and then the company obeying. Spotify has removed 70 episodes of Joe Rogan's show. So this seems like a crime, actually. But what do we know? We're not lawyers. Glenn Greenwald is. He's also an independent journalist. He joins us tonight. Glenn, thanks so much for coming on. So they've been telling us all this time, like, it's no big deal. Settle down, Glenn Greenwald. This is not a violation of the First Amendment, whatever it is. This looks like a violation of the First Amendment.
Right, and obviously that comment that you just referenced is in and of itself disturbing. Why should the White House be weighing in at all on who they think should be on Spotify, who they think should not be, what they think Spotify should and shouldn't be doing about their podcast hosts? But it's even more alarming when you consider that it's actually part of a broad pattern, even an explicit strategy by Democrats to use their majoritarian power in Washington to coerce companies to censor for them in ways the Constitution would prohibit. They've repeatedly subpoenaed social media companies and explicitly said, if you don't start censoring more, you will face legal and regulatory reprisals. Remember when Parler was taken off the internet, when it was the #1 most popular downloaded app, it was because AOC went online the day before and said, hey, Google and Apple and Wall Street and Amazon, why are you allowing this app that I don't like on the internet? And 3 days later, it was gone. So this is exactly the kind of coercion, Tucker, that the Supreme Court has said the First Amendment, that the government can't engage in without violating the First Amendment.
It's just so strange that lawmakers in the so-called opposition party sit back like there's nothing we can do. You know, these are private businesses. But as you just pointed out, these are not private businesses acting independently. They're acting in response to the threats of government, which regulates them.
I think this is one of the key, most overlooked parts of the whole censorship debate is these Silicon Valley companies never set out to want to censor. Why would they? Why would you want to kick people off your platform? Right. You want more people on your platform. And ideologically, they came out of Silicon Valley, which is about the free internet. So why are they now doing it? It's in part because they got pressured by journalists, the New York Times and NBC, saying if you don't censor, you have blood on your hands and you're responsible for the destruction of democracy. But a big reason is they know that Democrats will start enacting laws and enforcing regulation against them if they don't censor more. And they know that because Democrats are saying it explicitly over and over.
And there's no one they like to censor more than you. Glenn Greenwald on Substack.
Okay, so I'll leave that and let's get back to other people's opinions about it. But I consider it shocking that, all these celebrities are coming on and they're saying, I disagree with what this person said about how to make pumpkin pie, and therefore take him off the air because people are going to get sick from eating pumpkin pie according to his recipe. It's not Joe Rogan's recipe. He was interviewing somebody. He was interviewing the guy who invented or created the mRNA virus generation thing. That's the guy he was interviewing. And so, he said, this is the way I think this about pumpkin pie. So get rid of Joe Rogan and everything he talks about. Send him to the farm, send him out to the desert, put him on an iceberg. We don't want to hear. He said something that offended me. And therefore, he is not just censored on that, he is person non grata. And that these celebrities, and they don't know anything about what they're talking about. They have no idea what the conflict think. They just take, anybody who's opposed to the vaccine is evil. People who don't get the vaccine are murderers, all of this propaganda. And so that's all they know. And then the media supports it and says, this guy it was a whole group. Crosby, Stills, Stash, and
Stills, Nash, and Young, yeah.
Nash and Young. I'm just getting too excited.
Right.
So they all dissed on him, and they all want him off the air. And I'm going to take Joe. Right. Well, I'm going to take Jim Dingeman and Alex Stavropoulos off the air because you're wearing glasses. And that's an affront to people who
and Dennis. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to shut myself up.
All right, let me, before we start yakking about this is a piece from ABC News talking about this, because I know Joe actually decided to defend himself, but this is the reporting a day or two ago when they took down 100 episodes of the Joe Rogan Experience.
Video to talk about the most regretful and shameful thing that I've ever had to talk about publicly.
For the second time in a week, Joe Rogan, the #1 Spotify podcaster with 11 million listeners per episode, has some explaining to do.
I never used it to be racist because I'm not racist, but whenever you're in a situation where you have to say, I'm not racist, you up.
Starts calling them bird.
This time, under fire for a video that's gone viral that edited together Rogan using a racial slur more than 20 times on his podcast, spanning a little over 10 years.
Saying the word you've already said is just like.
The controversial podcaster taking to Instagram and apologizing for using the slur, but adding the videos were from years ago.
It's a video that's made of clips taken out of context of me of 12 years of conversations on my podcast, and it's all smushed together. Now, I know that to most people, there's no context where a white person is ever allowed to say that word. And I agree with that now. I haven't said it in years.
It is now up to the audience to decide whether or not they are going to accept that apology. Certainly, it's a fiscal decision that Spotify is making by choosing not to step away from Joe Rogan.
Spotify removing more than 100 episodes of the Joe Rogan Experience. And in an internal memo to staff obtained by ABC News, CEO Daniel Ek apologizing, saying he's deeply sorry and adding, "I do not believe that silencing Joe is the answer. We should have clear lines around content and take action when they're crossed, but canceling voices is a slippery slope."
The Spotify CEO statement clearly has underlying language that is appeasing a certain audience while patronizing another. There is no rationalization around the repeated use of a very offensive word. So his statement is a clear acceptance of Joe Rogan's behavior.
Rogan's popularity cannot be understated. His flippant attitude and irreverent curiosity has earned a cult-like following. In May 2020, he landed an exclusive deal with Spotify worth more than $100 million, one of the first of its kind for the medium, catapulting his show to the #1 podcast in the world.
Their ways of dealing with controversies like this in the past and recently have been very awkward. Clearly, Spotify has to address this in some way. It's problematic and it's going to catch up. At a certain point, users are just going to say, enough.
If you're there and you are offending so many people, are you being rewarded for your bad behavior?
Four-time Grammy Award-winning singer-songwriter India Arie is best known for her hit song Video.
It really just depends on whatever feels good in my soul.
Now, she's among the growing number of artists pulling her music and podcasts from Spotify.
This is a conversation about me standing up for my dignity.
India Arie posting on her Instagram saying she finds Rogan's language around race to be problematic and pointing to what she calls an issue of pay inequity for artists.
And while your intellectual property is the backbone of this company, they pay him, but they don't pay you. For me, it's a little bit more about Spotify.
Joe Rogan and the controversy around him, that was all just the breaking point for you with your relationship with Spotify.
Yes, Joe Rogan is not the reason I want my music pulled off. He is the final reason. We want to be paid for our intellectual property and the money that it generates in proportion to what we generate. We've been wanting to be paid fairly as working musicians. Black music is the trend setting. Black music gets the most spins on Spotify.
Spotify has to decide whether they want Joe Rogan to remain a part of their corporate DNA. And if so, they will have to also expect the liability that that partnership has now brought to their stakeholders and shareholders alike.
It's been a tumultuous start of the new year for Rogan and Spotify.
I'm sorry.
Just last week, Rogan addressing an entirely different controversy.
The podcast has been accused of spreading dangerous misinformation.
After 76-year-old Harvest Moon singer Neil Young held Rogan and his employer Spotify's feet to the fire for allowing the host and his guests to spread what Young says is rampant misinformation about COVID-19 and the vaccine.
The consumers and the creatives who share the platform with Joe Rogan are clearly saying in defiance that we would rather lose revenue than be aligned with the values and statements made by Joe Rogan.
I am in no position to tell Spotify not to have Joe Rogan. I don't believe in cancel culture. I don't want to be there while he's doing what he's doing.
India Arie says ultimately companies like Spotify will have to decide what they value in their content creators, and that will decide who stays and who goes.
All right, let's start with Victor. Now, Victor, you're the only one of us who teaches in a music school. So let's hear what you got to say about this, because unfortunately we don't have Playfell Benjamin on the online with us, because he'd have a lot to say about this. I remember Playfell and I, when that book, I forget who wrote this, either Princeton published it or Harvard published it, a cultural history of the word nigger. And we sat there and argued about that for hours. We went back and forth about that in terms of its significance, et cetera. But Victor, your comments about this, your thoughts.
Yeah. Well, first of all, in regard to Spotify and its relation to the music world, it's totally exploitative. I'd like to recommend all of you to the writings of David Rovics, Rovics. You probably know him, but he's written a lot about that, including recently. You can go to his website or find it. He writes on Counterpunch quite a bit. I mean, it's ridiculous what they pay. It's sort of transformed the way that, the opportunities that exist for musicians. With specific regard to Joe Rogan, yeah, I take a general position that of defending freedom of expression and opposition to censorship. Although I do feel that the use of epithets like the N-word is not part of free speech. To me, those are weapons. They're weapons of aggression, and they don't deserve to be defended on the grounds of free speech. And I think that has come to be understood now. And for the rest, the merits of the positions that are put forward on a broadcast and what constitutes misinformation and disinformation, all that I think should be up for free debate, and it shouldn't be settled by arbitrary dictates. And it's a lot of the arbitrary dictates that are set. Well, a lot of, let's say, I've jumped ahead of myself. A lot of the dictates that are set by governmental authorities on certain issues may be arbitrary and may be unfounded and deserve to be criticized. And this has come up in some respects in regard to the medical decisions made by doctors in the treatment of their own patients, and I think that's inexcusable. And part of the of what was being aired on Joe Rogan that elicited the hostility of the big establishment was his challenging of some of that, or his airing of people who challenged that. All that I think should be open to free discussion, and I wish there had been more. And there could be more free discussion, which is why I raised in connection when we were talking a couple of weeks ago about Kennedy's book. All that should be, whatever its merits, there should be free discussion about it. So with regard to Joe Rogan, I think I support the musicians in their general sort of objections to Spotify as an exploitative company, whether it's in terms of justifying the exclusion of a certain perspective, that's a whole other question.
All right, Ken, I know you're pretty hot in the collar on this issue, so why don't you respond?
Okay, yes. Victor, I'm jealous about your ability to articulate. Totally correct on the viewpoint that, and it's always going to be questionable about whether or not there's a difference between somebody talking about the benefits of pecan pie or the truth of the Nazi regime. And you can't say Nazi and you can't say Hitler. Germany outlaws it, but in the States we don't. And on that word, which it's almost going to become questionable that you can say, I can't say to somebody, you're an N-word, So it's to me, it's a very particular perverse phenomena in society that a word can't be said based on what your orientation or race is. If you're white, you can't use it. If you're black, you can use it, make lots of money doing hip hop. Very strange to me. And, to put it on the word. And it's kind of like, it's one of the words that George, the guy who did the 7 Dirty Words.
George Carlin,
he left that one out. He should have included that because that's another word that, it ruins careers. Like the guy from Seinfeld who tried to use it in a comedy routine.
Yeah, Michael Richards.
And he just got, he was trying to do it in a comic way, right. I believe.
And we should remember,
bad timing.
He's a comic first,
right?
Again, who got started in the '80s when using that in in a show was, including by white people, was, happened all the time. So he's from that back.
But times change, and I'm not really a critic of the special etiquette of different cultures. I think cultures are allowed to have their etiquette. If you've traveled around, Japan is not the same as France or Nigeria or Brooklyn or the Bronx, and LA is completely different than New York. So there are cultural requirements that you have to follow to maintain a social discourse between people. And so that's normal, and I don't object to those standards. I'm not that kind of a radical protesting things for their own sake. So on regards to this, though, it's just, I did have one comment. I was able to look something up. India Arias, she's doing okay. From 8 different sources, they assume her net worth is 4.5 million. Okay, so she's not having to eat at Nedick's standing up. She's got some money. So the system has worked for her to some degree, and Joe Rogan has she has a good, some of her songs have I think I saw 17 million or 1.7 million. She gets response from the public, but Joe Rogan gets lots of response from the public, and I personally like Joe Rogan because he's providing something like what we're doing. We're doing 2-hour shows. He does 2-hour shows, 3-hour shows, long form interviews with people from diverse areas. Sometimes it's about Atlantis. Sometimes it's about Omicron. Sometimes it's about cosmology. Sometimes it's about the political system or the Supreme Court. And he's affable because he represents the public. I find interviewers like that are effective because, and here's my analysis, they ask the questions you would ask. That's why they're good. And we have one guy on the Pacifica Network who does that very well.
Yeah.
From KPFA, the name, he's on at 10 o'clock and he does a show, but he's very genuine, and he's not elitist or anything. I can't remember his name. Doesn't matter. So I support Joe Rogan, and I don't think he ever did anything offensive. And regarding, pulling together a bunch of things, whoever put that together, the reason that happened was they lost on attacking him for saying something bad about vaccines, because he never stated as an individual that you shouldn't get the vaccine. He never said that. And so, to stifle conversation and say, no, you can't talk about, shh, don't talk about the Queen painting the roses red. Don't say anything that the roses are painted red. Everybody know that. No, don't talk about the emperor, that he doesn't have any clothes on. Please, don't mention that. He's naked, but shh, quiet, don't say it. So to say that there's questions about the effectiveness of the vaccine or the actual mortality rate of the COVID epidemic, don't say that. Please don't talk about that. That's not allowed. You can't say that. So that's really stifles society, I think, for the most part, to say people are not allowed to speak certain things. And the other side of that is people have to say certain things.
All right, but see, there's another way to look at that. See, I don't listen to Rogan like you do. Okay?
I don't listen to him that much. No,
I don't listen to him.
Yeah, you don't like him.
And it's not a question I don't like him. I just, I would listen to Rush Limbaugh to sort of get pissed off and like that. But I would not listen. I would listen to Rush Limbaugh because I wanted to see what kind of ideas are being communicated to the masses of Americans. The same way I look at Tucker Carlson for that period of time. But I go back to this question of white people using the N-word and how that works out. Now, I grew up in New York. I think a lot of us grew up in New York here.
Yeah.
You grew up in New York?
I did too.
Okay, so we all know how people use these words all the time. It's like, I was, and I was a high school athlete in New York. I was around Black and Hispanic colleagues all the goddamn time. Everybody used that word all the time. It was like, that was my revelatory introduction into the rich nuances of how the word is used among non-white people. Now, at some points, whenever we would sort of every once in a while we'd use the word, and some guy like, "What'd you just say, man?" You're like that, looking like, "What'd you say?" And so there is these divisions in using the word, because the word, of course, is associated with power, with slavery, with all sorts of things. The origins of the word does go back to slavery, if I recall. So that to me is very powerful. And I think of what happened to Don Imus. If you recall, when Don Imus got thrown off the air, he made his comment about watching the Rutgers University women's basketball team playing, and said, "Oh man, they're a bunch of nappy-headed hoes or hardcore hoes." Now, again, that's a prominent personality in the media who has millions of people listening to him, saying something on air that would be offensive to some people, and they took him off. Okay, that ended his career. I don't know if is he still on? Maybe he's moved to another outlet or something like that. I don't know if Imus is still on. But Howard Stern, look at Howard Stern.
Yeah.
He would make completely crazy comments all the time.
And he not only used the N-word, he did blackface.
Yeah, he would do, and he would do it with his black co-host Robin Quiver. So the question of how this is portrayed in the media, sort of modern day minstrelsy, if you will, taking those tropes and putting them into the present, is one part of it. Another part of it is, look at how we've reacted to the introduction of black comedy since the 60s. I'm thinking of when Dick Gregory would do the sort of path-breaking shows in Chicago, or what was always going on in the black comedic tradition, someone like Red Fox breaking open, and then of course Richard Pryor, and all the comedians after them. I mean, everything, and Lenny and Lenny Bruce. I mean, all these. So the use of these stereotypes to sort of make fun of the social contradictions is part of our culture. Now, Rogan's making comments about a public health emergency. Okay. That's where I think that people get upset, obviously, about it. He's making comments as if he knows or is in a position to reasonably comment about a problem that we all are living through all the time. And anyway, that's enough for me. Alex, your comments.
All right. Well, first off, Rogan's not going to be canceled. The people at Rumble already offered him $100 million to come to them. So, which of course what Spotify had offered him, a year or two ago. So he's, and his people are, people like him. So they will go wherever he goes. So you're not going to cut him off or stop him from, if you think he does anti-vax propaganda, he's not going to be stopped by this. Yeah, and you're only going to convince the people that listen to him, who think that now they're up in high dungeon because they think, this is cancel culture, this is censorship, and so you're just going to get them to dig in more. Again, like I said, well, if we're going to cancel people for the N-word again, how Howard Stern has some music variety show on ABC, the full, one of the big networks. So shouldn't he be taken down? And then, what other, as for Neil Young, he has his own skeletons. Back in the 80s, he said some vitriolically homophobic things about gay people and AIDS. So shouldn't he be canceled by all of his record label, etc., because he's anti-LGBTQ, etc. So you want to start targeting everybody, then at some point, who's left? Plenty. One thing that I did notice that just came up is, I don't know if you guys heard, Governor Hochul here in New York announced, I don't know if it was today or yesterday, that they're taking down the mask mandate beginning tomorrow. And I think in your state, Ken, on the 15th, Governor Newsom is ending your mask mandate. So as for COVID, everybody's just kind of throwing up their hands. It's also happening in Europe. They're getting, vaccines are a different thing, but the mask mandate is basically going bye-bye. So,
yeah, but Alex, before we bring Dennis on, Donald Trump. I mean, he got canceled off of Twitter.
Right.
Because he's using Twitter to essentially incite an insurrection.
Sure.
And so I guess in some ways, well, there's where, Oliver Wendell Holmes' famous comment about, you don't cry fire in a crowded movie theater. I mean, that's
but Jim, he said afterwards that he thought it was a bad decision, that he changed his mind about that. He thought that it was incorrect, that he became more of a free speech absolutist, before he died. So he actually repudiated essentially that whole statement later in life. So that's which I find interesting.
What Dennis has to say about this whole issue with Joe Rogan.
Dennis.
Thoughts, Dennis?
I hate the shock jocks. I've hated them since I first heard them. Howard Stern and Don Imus are two people who I thought were polluting the culture for their own benefit. And people who went along with them polluting the culture. And I don't like them. As far as the N-word is concerned, I don't use it. I don't like people who use it. I don't care what ethnicity you are. I don't like the word, personally.
All right, thank you, Dennis. Victor, do you have some last comments before we throw it to Kenny and we close the show? Victor?
Oh, I turned off my camera. I was about to leave because I have to go to bed. But I think I've said what I needed to say. I think that we're kind of in agreement that of defending freedom of speech, but recognizing at the same time that certain use of insults and a word becomes. I think, as Ken pointed out, there are different contexts in which a word can be used. When it's in a context of being an insult, it's legitimately regarded as something that is like an act of aggression, and so therefore can be condemned and even punished. So because there has to be ultimately a social campaign against the use of terms that create hostility and pain among people. So I'm going to say good night at this point.
Good night.
Good talking with you. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Victor. Thank you, Victor.
Bye.
Kenny, you have the last word. Goodbye, Victor. Kenny,
okay. Thank you. I appreciate it. Let me see. Am I coming up here? There we go. I think that'll do it. Okay. So what I wanted to say is the affable broadcaster at KPFA I was referring to is Mitch Jeserich. I think of him as the Edward R. Murrow of Pacifica. He's just popular because he represents the average listener, and he's, he doesn't act like an elitist. He just asks common questions. How long have you thought about that, as opposed to, a sophisticated question. The other thing, Jim, in terms of what you were saying, referred to this banishing word. There were, at least when I was growing up, I can think of 8 to 10 different racial slurs that we commonly used in Brooklyn. I don't know about the Bronx, but I don't want to repeat them all here. But I looked up on the internet, and you can just Google slurs for African Americans, and you see a list of about 100. And the last comment about it is, I think it's very dangerous to try to enforce politeness or correctness or goodness. To enforce it, you can encourage it, you can recommend it, you can even exclude or isolate yourself from what you consider to be misbehavior or inappropriate, but you cannot dictate I think it's wrong and dangerous to dictate what you consider to be proper behavior. Even one of the most commonly accepted courtesy things that men have with women, of letting the women enter the elevator first, or exit the automobile, the subway first. Even that can't be dictated as mandatory. You know, being good. Give your seat to an elderly person. You can't force people to be good. That, to me, is the beginning of tyranny and anarchy and, totalitarianism. We're going to tell you about what is right. Don't raise your right eyebrow. You can raise the left one, but don't raise the right one. Because raising the right eyebrow is offensive. Why? Don't ask. So I think it's bad to try to enforce civility, etiquette, and what everybody should do. And this is common sense. It always comes from a point source, and that's dictatorial. And that's the problem with it. So that's it. That's my last
Let me differ with you on that point. I always will allow a woman to enter the elevator.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Always will allow an elderly person, even though I'm getting elderly. There's some people who are even more elderly than me, and I will always let them have a seat.
That's right, but you can't mandate it.
Well, it's not mandated, but actually, it gets back to I think of Eugene Goffman, the great sociologist who wrote Face-to-Face Behavior. And little interactions like that are sort of culturally coded. Absolutely, Kenny, absolutely. But, they do maintain a certain amount of social fabric between people.
They define the culture. Absolutely. They define the culture.
Because look at how people are reacting to, some innocent person standing on a subway stop and some idiot throws her into the subway. I mean, that's not considered proper behavior, period.
Right. Now, I've done an experiment with this with my son and I. When you're walking down the street, men acknowledge their presence to each other. Now, it depends upon what city you're in. It can be a nod of the head, just raising your eyebrows, or making a hand signal. Okay? And in different cities, it's different things. But it goes back to the 1400s. To indicate you're not a threat, you don't have a weapon, you're not going to charge on the guy, showing your right hand, you don't have a weapon in it. But it's a very common practice. Complete strangers, you go, hey, and but it's different in different cities, right? So that's a cultural thing. Oh. And the Asians bow their head, nod the head down. So it's different in different societies, and it defines the culture.
All right. Well, as we exit out the show, I'll have to say that I was in culture shock the first time I ever walked around in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And city women would come up and say to you, hello. That was a little difficult to deal with. I wasn't used to that.
Who would do that? Who would do that?
Good-looking women.
Oh, women, yeah.
And it's with a big smile on their face, and I thought I was walking through a red light district. But anyway, listening to Going Viral, this February 8th edition of Going Viral, goingviral.news. My name is Jim Dingeman. We've been joined with Ken Aaron, California, Victor Wallis in Boston, Alex Stavropoulos in Manhattan, Dennis Goldstein in New Jersey, and myself, Jim Dingeman, in the Bronx. So anyway, thank you for listening and stay tuned.